Hello, and welcome to the Revenue Room podcast, where we talk about all things digital, data, and AI, and of course, revenue. Today, I'm so excited to introduce our guest, Kate Spellman. Kate is the Chief Commercial Officer at Questex and has a long and illustrious career in B2B media. She is an accomplished business leader with a proven and consistent track record of launching and driving rapid growth within the information services businesses. She provides a unique blend of corporate strategic vision and the ability to see through execution. She's highly collaborative. She's an incredible friend and supporter of H2K Labs and has an unbelievable view as it relates to data, technology, digital within the B2B media and events ecosystem. And we're so glad to have you, Kate. Welcome.
Thanks, Heather. I am so excited to be here. I am honored. The last time we actually saw each other was at your lunch lab, and that was held in New York. And I have to say, I came away from that lunch with more actionable items than I ever have from anything. And we'll talk about a lot of those today, but it was such great timing, very focused on revenue and growth, which is what we have to do going forward. So I'm truly very excited about this conversation as we move forward.
Thank you so much. That was our first one, and we were preparing for that for weeks, and I was very nervous. I put myself always in the shoes of the audience as a former operator, and my one thing was I didn't want people going away with not having the actionable takeaways. So that's really great to hear. So you have been in the B2B media industry, I think, as long as I have, and we won't tell anyone how long that is, but you give the audience some background in terms of your experience.
Sure. So I have been in the industry for forever. As you say, I started with CMP Media way back in the day, and I worked on Electronic World News. So that's one of the first they launched on the electronic side of the business. Stayed there for really almost my entire career, stayed with UBM. And then I moved over to Penton. And Penton, I moved over to and was very lucky to be part of the transformation of that business and helping to set that up for sale. But it really helped me learn about transformation, moving quickly, and setting up around communities. I think this is what, Heather, you and I have been working on our whole life, is moving businesses forward. And I really do believe that connecting buyers and sellers, our job is to move businesses forward and really connect that content by information, whether it be events through media or through data, subscriptions, et cetera. Penton was then purchased by Informa. And in Informa, I was president of Informa Engage, which was such a great experience, and able to run the marketing services group for across Informa. And again, learned a tremendous amount there, and then came to Questex. And the reason I actually left Informa to come to Questex was it was very much back to that Penton play, being able to transform a company and really starting from the ground up, and that connection between building around events, adding the data, adding the media. And it's just it was built as a little jewel. Kerry Goomis set this up, and he brought the right vehicles. And I think it's been really fun to build those out.
Yeah, I've been so impressed with the traction. I think I remember talking to Paul Miller when he had first started and where you were revenue-wise and where you are now. And just even coming out of the pandemic, just how your events took off. It's just been very exciting to watch. So
It's been a lot of fun, and it's a great crew. Working with Paul is fabulous, and we've got a great executive group, and I think really good skill sets that sit across the company as well. It's all about the people, isn't it?
absolutely. And actually, it'll be fun to get into this later. And I always have a hard time saying, like, is Questex an independent event organizer? Are they a B2B media?
Yeah.
You're everything. And I just saw a launch about research. So you're getting into custom content development and insights. That's actually going to be both interesting and complex from a data standpoint. But just before we kick off, a little fun question. What's an unknown fun fact about your career?
So unknown fun fact, I think I absolutely did put a couple things in there, but I did think about this. And I think one of the funnest things is I actually worked in the yachting industry for a while, and I was able to do some offshore boating deliveries, meaning 4 or 5 days out in the Atlantic, crossing over to different places and seeing different things. So that was a lot of fun, a lot of work, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. But what a great experience. So you're literally in the middle of the ocean, looking at the stars, a lot to think about, but a lot of fun, truly a lot of fun.
So I just little side note on I'm like addicted to this Below Deck show.
Oh, yeah. That's it. We watched it. Been to some of those places, so it's fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's dive into this. So just to give a clear representation of all of the business lines that Questex is involved in.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you give a description about it for me?
Yes, I can. So we are an event and media company and data company in the B2B space. We are very focused on what we call the experience economy. So living better is hospitality and wellness, living longer, health and life sciences, and enabled by technology. So we're literally in 4 different industries. We're 75% revenue around event, which is a lot. However, we're very focused on building up our digital data research part of the business. And I think the idea is we are very focused on delivering information to help buyers and sellers connect and do business better. So we have to rely on those data insights in order to feed the events, in order to feed our digital. And I think our whole premise has been when you're at an event, you have a 1-year touch point with an audience or an attendee. And we really are very focused on that full year round. You get to know the audience better. You get to know the attendee better. You get to know your customers better and what they need and deliver that type of information to them. And I will say during COVID, I think it helped us activate our digital side of the business, which we doubled in a very short period of time. Obviously, we're forced to. But I also think that it gave us more information on helping feed that database, build out the database, and just really intertwines together. And we were able to launch more quickly back to events because we have the database. We didn't sit unused for 2 years in that touch point.
That database part is so important. I remember, and they've come back from it, when Informa sold off all of the Penton Media properties.
Yeah.
I was like, why would you do that? But now I realize they did it because of a financial part. But to me, I was like, oh my gosh, now they're losing that 365, 247 connection with the audience through the media product. And this is becoming more and more urgent today to have the relationship with the audience due to how difficult it is now to capture new audience with everything that's happening with the change in algorithms with Google and email being so difficult to deliver. You were ahead of the curve on that one. So you also, here's an interesting question I have for you. So you were the CMO and now you are the customer officer. And to me, that shows a change, a business transformational change in the way that you are looking at your relationship with customers. So can you describe that?
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So my history has been very much in front office. So sales, marketing, I've run verticals. And now my responsibility is really focused on what we call the center of excellence. So it's how do we scale, how do we operate, and how do we commercialize the business? So under my purview is skill sets that we've been very focused on hiring at a senior level that we wouldn't be able to do if we did it vertical by vertical. So that is around marketing performance, around technology, event performance, experience. So how do our attendees experience registration, et cetera? And then in market sits what I call the vertical touch points that to me, you have to have in vertical. So that would include content, market leadership, the vertical expertise, sales, but it also includes marketing. You have to have marketers who understand that vertical. So that sits in market. So therefore, my purview is really more on the commercial side. And I will say that the people I hire are very commercially oriented. So what does that mean? It means the products have to work. We're selling the right product. There's ROI. And when I say products, it's digital, it's data, it's event activation. So it's sponsorship as well. And then how do we scale those by bringing them across the company? So give you an example. If there's a vertical that's very interested in launching a $20,000 product, not going to happen. We need to do something that's going to scale across the entire company. Therefore, we get the revenue, we get the EBITDA against that product.
Absolutely. The word product in the multi-sided business model ecosystem is very complex because the product, it is your audience, it is the content, it's the channel, right? It's the experience.
It's all of the above. It's all of the above.
And it's the product you've sold to the what I call the what's called the sell side, the advertisers, sponsors, exhibitors. These are all these different components that comprise the product.
Yeah.
Not here's your widget or here's your piece of software.
Exactly.
Complicated and complex. What do you feel with everything that I one of the things I said at Lunch Lab was this industry has just gotten so battered and beaten up, and it looks like it just is a never ending. I call it the consistent state of perpetual. Yeah, like it's never ending. And now with AI, which is rapidly changing life in general, where do you see the industry going? Who are going to be the winners and who are going to not be the winners?
It is about being data driven. And one of the things that at Lunch Lab that Amy Roman talked about was looking at that data. It was like, look at the data, stop, and then go. And that really resonated with me because I think it is really focusing on what that data is telling you and what data to look at, which gets really complicated. But it's looking at that, it's moving very quickly and embracing this change. And I think also in this industry, which is a little scary, is this industry is becoming much more consumer. We have so much to learn from experiences on the consumer side, yet also much more business focused, right? So it's all about the ROI. What am I getting back? What do I need? How are these leads working? Are they going to work? So I think it's all of that together. And one of the challenges we have right now is with AI, all of these technologies are coming out again. Your simple tech stack is being imploded as well. So I think all of that and focusing on, and you've really said this a lot, it's focusing on what is that revenue? Where can you get that and being able to deliver that EBITDA against that? I think that's going to be the winners, but it's moving with speed, not getting distracted, focus, at the same time delivering fantastic customer experience. It's a lot, all with, and again, you've talked about this, we're owned by PE. Expectation is you're meeting that EBITDA level as well.
Absolutely. The way I like to call the revenue part, it's how do we acquire, keep, grow, expand, and make it healthy, right? Because the health is really the indicator of the customer centricity. It's the indicator of speed, right? Because you are up to speed on everything, and it's the indicator of innovation. The metric there is lifetime value, I would imagine, but I think people overuse that word. So actually, that was a good little segue into private equity because I'm deep into this research paper that was published by INSEAD. It was in Europe, but there's so much greatness in it. But it was really actually from a private equity viewpoint, which is value creation. And in the old days, value creation was how do we acquire market share through mergers and acquisitions? How do we, I don't want to say manipulate, but I guess they call it financial engineering, and then the cost cutting. And that is no longer the successful equation. The successful equation from this report is it's digital and data-driven enterprise value creation. There's like a lot, and the part that they talk about is that there's now this friction between what the PE investors are looking for in terms of value creation from their portfolio companies and even how they evaluate, but also a lot of the CEOs out there have tried and invested in data and digital and have not gotten the return. So they're sitting there going, there's some friction there. Do you see that happening?
Absolutely. And I think part of the challenge we have and in this world is we've got established brands that are very solid that you don't want to disrupt. And then we have these other things that are faster growing. I will say that MidOcean, having owned Penton and now Questex, they know our business really well and they have invested in the data. But I think, and there is a sea change. There is a huge sea change. And I think where Questex has a little bit of advantage here for now, because again, things are changing so quickly, is we were able to build a really simple stack. So one of the things that we did to be able to show return on that investment is we set up what we call Q Activate. So it actually is very tangible and it touches all of our data. So we've got an interesting in that article that you mentioned thank you so much for sharing. It also talked about, sure, you can put data in one place, but what are you doing with that? And we certainly did. We've got we've got more data than we know what to do with, but all our audience data is in one place. It is our warehouse. It's our performance tool. It's our CDP, but we've connected it with what our audience is looking externally on different websites, internally on our website, and then what content going to our content teams, what content is our attendees and audience consuming, and therefore what we need to deliver. So you can see how it really connects to the customer. And then we were able to launch some brands off of that. So we launched an event, for example, called Broadband, because we saw a lot of interest in that. So that was a big success day one. We actually used this tool for the hospitality show, which is a big hospitality event, which was a multi-million-dollar launch last year. And that's on track to increase 32% this year. So we're using that and able to come back with, here's how we're using it and here's what it looks like. So these are real tangible results, but it is very difficult. And I think one of the things that makes us more successful there is one, smaller, we're 280 people, but because we work so closely together centrally and internally in our industries, we're able to have more visibility across the company.
Yeah, no, that use case you just brought up about the two launches is that's really interesting and critical, because launching an event or a media property is very high risk because there's a lot of sunk costs all the way up until, let's say, an event the day of. But if you actually had the data, which was consistent and growing, and you were evaluating and analyzing it about not just that it's broadband, for example, but all of the subtopics that they were interested in and who was interested in it. And then being able to take that data and say, all right, let's go. We have evidence that this can be successful. And as you're going along, you're using the data to track your progress and pivot because you've got the real-time view. That's a great example of being able to generate new revenue.
But to add to that, I would say, and this is a stat from H2K, 86% don't know what to do about AI. And I think the more we go along this year, the harder it gets, because that data is moving faster and faster. And how do you pull it? What do you pull? What are you looking at? And I think, to your point, PE companies are going to be looking more and more closely at that. We actually just hired a gentleman, Steve Johnston, who is actually been at UBM many years, but he has a deep technology background, and he is going to be very focused on AI. At least we have one point person, because we're all dabbling in it. But I think, to your point, where is the focus? And it's happening pockets that are happening very quickly, and it's going to change our industry.
Yeah, no, there's got to be a dedicated effort to how AI is being deployed in the business, and the dabbling part probably has to get put into a process, because the learnings that are going to come from it, and then how do you scale and deploy, or where do you not? That's another really big part about AI, is there's a lot of risk from a legal standpoint, especially for media companies that deal with intellectual property, that, and also putting your content and your IP at risk, there's going to have to be a structure put in place. But I personally am very bullish on what AI can do. And I'm like, of course your editor should be using it to do, of course.
No, you said something really interesting right now. And I think that I would say, growing up in the media and event space for so many years, and this has shifted in the last few years, certainly, but a lot of us grew up as professional dabblers, and we can't be dabblers anymore, right? It's very much about what's the process, what's the result. And again, focusing on that data, which you are doing at H2K and with the revenue room. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Getting to the revenue part of this, and that is, and I always get on my little soapbox here, like revenue needs a seat at the data table and the AI table now. How are you now using data to empower your commercial team, to drive better results for customers, to make quota attainment rate higher?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we've really done is all of our customer data is now in Salesforce. That has made a huge difference because we are actually able to look at it, which we were not able to do when we wouldn't know what that month roll up was until 2 months later. So it gives us again actionable data. And we do have every what we call day fives every month. We get on a call with Paul, CEO, Pat, who's our CFO, myself, and one of the group presidents. We walk through where we are, which gives us a lot more visibility from a pacing standpoint. The other thing we've really done is look at renewals. We didn't have a very active renewal. So we look at, we're doing them, which is a big deal around events. And then we're looking at who is renewing, who is not. So this is giving us that data to be able to look at. I also think that some of the important things that we're doing is looking, and this is more methods that we're using. We have what we call a sales fuel, which is Friday, get the salespeople on to talk about things that we're rolling up on or things that are happening and things to look for. We also have the sales council, which is the market leaders, and this has only been activated for the last 2 months. But where that has been fantastic is they need different Salesforce data than we're looking at. So they're asking for it. So they're getting very specific on the kind of data that they want to pull, which is not something we had, and we have Salesforce. So a big gap there. And I would say the other thing that we're using a lot, and the Salesforce is huge fans of, is Gong. So we've become a Gong company that uses AI to look at phone calls, what's working. And what's so interesting about this, and I could have never imagined this, it will give you a probability of close, which I think is so interesting and such great learnings for someone like me who, I'm like, that certainly can't do that. It does. And it's very interesting. But it also helps us with training new salespeople so they can hear the tapes. So we're going to be using a lot more there as well, because we do have I wouldn't say we have a churn problem, but we do have churn on the SDR level as people come in and getting them trained across the company. So that's got to be a focus going forward.
That's very normal, by the way, just given the nature of the roles for the SDRs. But if I think with data, there's a new way to make SDR roles way more interesting, because if they're able to mine data to identify like prospects that are doing things like customer behavior on your website that aren't really revealed yet, but you're able to, let's say you've got, all right, listen, I'm investigating sponsorships for something. So I'm out there noodling around on all these websites, and you don't know who I am, but I have a budget of 100K, let's say, and I'm going to your website, to this person's website. I'm looking at these things, and there's traits about that you would know of. If they're doing this, that is a high level indicator. That is a prospect that we should be going after. And I might be a subscriber to your newsletter, so you have my email. So if there's a way to support SDRs with a more creative way for them versus just they're like outbounding and trying to get meetings, I think it makes not only the job more interesting for them, but it actually is helping upskill them to be very data driven.
I love that. I love that. And I think that it gives that thought leadership component that I think we all need to get back to. What are we delivering back to the client rather than, do you want to buy a booth? Do
Yeah.
you want to buy this next webinar? Which I think we have a danger of falling back into, especially at that level.
Yeah. And actually also with the Gong component, and this is again great for training, is again, once you use, and you've been using Gong for what, over a year? So you definitely, you have some historical data there, but what kinds of calls and structures work well for which kinds of clients who are interested in which kinds of thing? So it helps There's a lot. Gong is awesome. There's a lot you can do with Gong. With that, have you tracked, by the way, if Gong is correct when they say the probable likely, like how likely something is to close? Have you been tracking?
Closer than you think. For me, it was a surprise learning for me. I would say it's much closer than you think, which is, and I think the more data you give, the more it starts to learn what those are. And we use it very heavily in our health life sciences, and there's a lot of closing happening in that group. So, unlike hospitality, investment will have much larger deals, but not as many as, for example, a Fierce, which will have a ton. So it has that data where it's feeding in and getting really accurate.
That's a very interesting point, which is the sales cycle, the size, and the speed of close in order to get the probability correct. So tell me about how you're empowering customers to use data to get better value from you.
One of the things we're doing, and I know you're familiar with this, is we are working with a company called Channel Metric. I'm really excited about this. So I feel like we do a lot at Questex internally, looking at data and sharing data, especially on the audience side, which to me is so interesting. It's even just talking what you were talking about and leveraging that information for SDRs. We don't do that as much as we should. So Channel Metrics is a reporting tool that we'll be launching called Q Insights. We are launching actually in August through the telecom side of the business, so starting with technology. And what it will do is pull together all of reporting in one place. The customer will actually have a dashboard that includes your lead reporting, your Google Analytics, your event reporting into dashboard. So it's not product by product, which is how we report today. And I think many of us still do. But we're also planning on pulling in what's trending on and off our sites. So as a customer, you can look at this and say, oh, the audience is looking at these 3 articles. So we're starting to really start incorporating that and using that a lot more. I do think the more we use this, the more it is going to become a tool. If I'm a marketer, I'm getting this report, it's not only just giving me all of the information, but we can add scoring to the audience. So good upsell opportunity. So I think this kind of just showcases in one place that ROI for the client. And the good thing is it's immediate. You're not having to wait. The other thing that we are looking at, I know all of our competitors are, is activating lead retrieval in a better way. Now, again, if we layer Channel Metrics over that as well, you have more of the demographics, et cetera, to be able to reach that for different types of programs. So very focused on the data portion of the business. And then I think also I was just talking to our head of content who was on my team, and we are talking about there is a gap, for example, for white papers to get to market. If we're using Q Insights, we can come back to them and say, look, these are the 4 topics that are trending. This is what your audience wants to read. Do any of these resonate with you? And here are the articles that they're actually reading. So I think it's just integrating more and more of that into that for our customers. Because again, you look at data now, that you can go buy data from anybody. But again, I think first party data is becoming important, more and more important. What do you know about it? And then content and audience have always been at our center. So we have to stay true to who we are.
No, absolutely. And the point about the leads, when I was running my media business, we had very sophisticated advertisers. You probably have them in your tech group, their demands on the data governance,
Huge.
its own, was a huge burden on and cost on the business. And it also had delayed us because we had to cleanse, dedupe, map. It had to be in the ICP, the buyer persona, the company size. Certain regions they would accept, certain they wouldn't. If it was given to them within the last 6 months, it was not counted. It was crazy.
Oh, I know that world. Yes.
But they got leads a week later if we were on track. And those were dead on arrival, right? Leads, if they're asking for information, or they want to be followed up with. And again, an enterprise sale, I wouldn't say quite dead on arrival, but listen, it put us at a disadvantage compared to companies that were able to do it faster. So I think that the real-time nature of what you're doing and giving your customers access to that in a more immediate sense, it's actually a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Not,
And
not
that's
a
it
lot.
is a week now. You're going through being clean manually. It's all of the above.
Tell me about I take this to a macro perspective. And where do you see the threat, like the real threat? If you were like, you're doing all of these investments, this is huge. This is huge what you're doing. And it's hitting every aspect of your business. But there's got to be something there that you're
Oh,
saying, what is that?
okay. So I think there's more than one. And I do think a lot of this is AI driven. If you look at what's happening with Google, we are built on traditional sales, media, and events. So again, you look at Google, move to GA4. So your page views went down. SEO is a real concern. You look at ChatGPT, you do your search now and look what comes up first. So that's all being pushed down. And I know Google's trying to address that as well. But what does it do for us? It's ad decline. It's anonymous traffic. It's not important. Programmatic revenue. Everyone ran to programmatic revenue, right? And that's disappearing. So I think it's looking at where do you play in there? What data or what content is going to be important? Is it news? I've heard it's news. I've heard it's how to is going to be really important. So what is that? And how do you keep um, that very strong bond with your audience when all of this data is just being collected from everywhere? And by the way, who are you going to partner with from an AI standpoint that isn't going to either share that information or yes, we do want to share that information because it is all about sharing, so you can't not. So there's all of those things to consider. I think the other thing that I'm just seeing happen again is data sprawl. How many calls do you get? We can do this with your data. We can do this with your data. And it's getting confusing again, where we can part you, we will identify all your unidentified traffic, et cetera. So what does that look like? And then how do we monetize that? It's just a lot. And then I think on traditional trade shows are mammoth. They're hard to take a right-hand turn with. So attendee registrations have changed completely. So that changes everything from registration, your mobile app, et cetera. And then your customers we talked about this, they want their leads yesterday and they better do something today. So everything's just moving really fast. And I think that we still are in a culture where it's more of that traditional and you want to keep that establishment because there's dollars against that. So how do you move? So I think all of that is a threat. It's moving very quickly.
Do you see being able to attract, let me rephrase this. Do you see the skills that you are seeing out there as a threat? And then let alone being able to attract the right one?
What a great question. Yes to all of the above. I think we got, and again, lessons learned. I think we have some really great talent at Questex. And I think we need to let them grow, make mistakes, and go out and have that ownership. So I think it truly is about pushing more ownership to some of the team that we have. They are ready to embrace, they're ready to go. So let's do that. To your point of attracting talent, we seem to be able to attract good talent. Are we attracting the right talent? I don't know. I think it's your stat that you'd given before, where 85% of companies and CEOs don't know exactly where that is coming from and how conservative are you going to be. So I think that's what we're wrestling with, I would say right now. Absolutely.
I think that way, I think this AI thing, I don't care if you're going to become a psychologist like my daughter, you feel like you're going to become a painter, or you want to go into marketing, business, accounting, everything now has to teach them how this is impacting the way that they're going to approach their careers and the skills that they're going to attain. It's really going to change education.
It's going to change. And I think it's going so fast. And I know, look, I lived the internet where that certainly just imploded, right? We had print publications and then everything moved. But the thing that didn't change was delivering the right audience at the right time to your, right? And that first party database and content. So I think we just also have to stay very true to who we are without and learning very quickly without getting distracted by the next big shiny penny.
No, and I agree with that 100%. I actually, many years ago, gosh, this was like, it had to be in the late 90s or early 2000s. I said to my dad, I said, you know that the Thomas Publishing's assets, not the advertising revenue, it's the data you're sitting on. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And because I just, and I don't know where that came from. I always remembered it. I always remember how he looked at me too, like I was off my rocker. Where I'm leading with that is that there is so much you have a media company, an event company, because you are so ingrained into the workflow of people every day. If you are good at what you do and the value you're delivering, they're coming to you to help make decisions better, faster, with less risk. And if there's a way that data can be mined, both on from the audience side to make them better at what they're doing, and then also to maybe you don't even need the advertising side anymore if you're actually able to create solutions that deliver so much value to the audience. But the point is that I think staying true to your core is absolutely the world's your oyster. I believe, but it is keeping the technology and that complexity lower. And it is ironic because literally the trend now is simplify the data stack, simplify the tech stack. You can't do that.
And what is this all going to do to pricing too? AI is coming into, oh, you only have to pay $100 for this. What?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. Yeah.
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 Let's turn it over. I don't know if you have anything to add to the data, revenue, media event discussion. If not, I'd love to turn it over to how you and I are working together with the Revenue Room Connect.
Yeah. And I have to say, again, really excited about that. I came back from the lunch lab and I literally had an email that completely typed up and sent to everybody. And I'll give you examples. I think really going through the clarity of roles on who does what, because I think that can get kludgy in people's way. The other thing we talked about that I found so interesting is focusing on that customer success. And I believe we have a huge gap there. I think everyone does, like really trying to make that customer success. What do those roles look like? And I think to the point, again, Amy Roman talked about hiring that and increasing revenue immediately. So I think there are things like that we need to look at. And you alluded to this again in the call earlier on editorial compensation on engagement.
Right.
Why are we not doing that? That's just a no-brainer. So a lot of these action items that you will be happy to know we are implementing. I am so looking forward to your meeting, RevvedUP, November 13th to 14th, I believe, in Sarasota, Florida.
Yeah.
It's around that data-driven discipline, AI, and revenue, and it's something we all have to pay attention to. It's changing our world. We have to be ahead of that, and it is looking at that next generation. And what I love that you're focused on is, yes, having Paul as CEO, but really getting into the executive committee, because it is, again, that clarity of roles and everyone brings a different angle to it. Pat, as our CFO, is going to be looking more at what does that pricing look like? What does that really do to us? What does pacing really look like? And how is that going to hit margin as opposed to EBITDA? So everybody needs to have a voice there. And I think the thing that I most love about what you're doing, including these podcasts that I did listen to, is it's strategy, sure. And I think there are a lot of people who are very focused on strategy, but you're bringing it down to real strategy and real tactics. And I don't think you're finding that. And the thing that hit me, and I did share this with you as well, I think it was obvious. I don't think that as an event media company, at least in my history, we have treated the customer data like we do the audience data. We know how to, we have the skill sets, but we keep that very separated. So these are all learnings I'm very anxious to get ahead of. And you bring great people together.
Thank you. No, we're really excited about what we're doing with Revenue Room Connect and RevvedUP, which is an event that's going to serve the Revenue Connect professional network we're building. And And what we say it is for CEOs and their revenue critical C-suite teams, which actually is the whole construct of the revenue room, which I trademarked back in 2018, I think. And that was all about the story behind that is I was consulting for a media company and they had an actual revenue room. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool to call it the revenue room. And then you walk in and they're the SDR team, the marketing team feeding the SDR team the lead, the sales team, the customer success team. And I was like, wow, they're all working together. And it just, and I had just come from another company where the customer success team was reporting into product and not into sales. And it was a total colossal disaster, but they were convinced that was the way it needed to be. But I was like, anyone who touches the customer, who then it impacts revenue, is got to be in this revenue room. And I was like, it has to include product and the audience and even with the CFO, which is why we created this construct. And then the other element is the ability to look at what other people are doing outside the four walls of our immediate industry. So you mentioned the change in nature of your audience member, which is there's a lot of B2C, B2B blending now in terms of expectations and preferences. So bringing in not just media, not just events, but the B2C side for sure, but marketplaces and information services and things along and marketing and platforms and tech. Really excited about both the network and the event and to have you as part of that journey.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. And for us, it's a great time. Last year, we actually beat our revenue and beat our EBITDA. So double-digit growth, really proud of it. We're accelerating this year as well. However, in order to keep up with that and all of these changes, this is imperative. So what you're doing is truly imperative, I think, to not only Questex, but to the industry ahead.
Like that Andy Grove saying that they used to, you remember only the paranoid survived? True. Actually, the theme for the event is racing, acceleration, skill, and precision and acumen.
Yeah.
All right. So now I have some fun questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. So rapid fire for Kate. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. Sweet or savory?
Savory. Truffle fries and mayonnaise.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was going to say, if I ever had a last meal, it's going to be fried chicken, not ice cream. So weirdest place you've ever traveled to?
I think actually too, we were in Tunisia right before there was a coup. And then I always think about this when again, in my boating history, early 20s, went to Haiti, little dock during that area. And it was a very dangerous time. I don't know what we were thinking. We were too young, but a lot of poverty. It was just a really interesting time.
Wow, there was a coup. We just decided to.
Not the best timing.
And then what is the best book you have read recently?
Best book recently. So recently I read a lot. I'm an avid reader, read all the time. Don't be impressed because over the summer it's going to be all beach books like Emily Henry, and she's great. Read all of that. But I would say Dare to Lead. I think that is a good book. It's about staying curious, connection, empathy, and courage. So it's really more about thinking of the leadership of today. And I think it's definitely a worthwhile read for everybody.
All right, I'll be getting that one. I love to read too.
Yeah.
And good one to get back into it. With that, I really appreciate having you on as our guest. And I think this is going to be a great podcast. So thank you, Kate.
As always, Heather, thank you.